Hey everybody, it is Jay
Hi, it's Andrea.
and we're back. It's week 2, Biggest Loser, season 17, Temptation Nation. And last week we did about 30-minute conversation, and today we're going to do about 15 minutes. We're gonna take our own little time diet here and shorten it up. So let's see what happens. First thing that happened on the show was the food challenge. That's always every season. There's at least one food challenge. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 food challenges. And this one took place in the mall. And the idea was, once again, for people to kind of guess and figure out what was the highest amount of calories and fat. And it really probably wouldn't have made that much difference because, I mean, everything that everybody had to choose from was the typical things, the comfort foods that we all were faced with. And I know, Andrea, your favorite thing that you're always talking to me about is salt besides the fat and calories. So what do you have to say about that whole challenge?
Well, one of the biggest things that I saw is the 2 dishes that came out was the Alfredo, the pasta, that had over 3,000 milligrams of sodium in it. And it's like the one thing that most people go for when they're sick or if it's really cold is that comfort food. And I've polled a lot of people during some of my talks, and mac and cheese comes up first every single time. And to think mac and cheese had over 3,000 just as well. And if we're taking that to comfort ourselves and think of that instant gratification, in the long haul, we're not doing anything for ourselves or for our body. We're actually doing more harm than good. And I know that they talk about salt isn't that big of a deal, but when you're taking in that much, more than your daily allowance, it's just not something that rings very true and healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I pick on you a lot about that.
Yeah, you always do. I mean, for me, what happens is I look at it as I'm not really salt sensitive. So my sister was an RN, and she always said, unless you're salt sensitive, it doesn't really matter that much in terms of I don't have high blood pressure, so it never, if you have high blood pressure, it's disastrous. So I always kind of looked at it, what difference does it make, because it's just extra water weight, and so you can just kind of flush it out of your system. But I do find that it seems to be that when I have a lot of salty things, it tends to the sweet craving happens. So I do notice, I would say that that seems to be like a gateway at times, the saltiness. Like if I'm having something real salty, I want something sweet to kind of counterbalance it. And then once I have something sweet, it's like, well, that's too sweet. Maybe I need something salty. So I will say that I kind of go back and forth. It does get a little dangerous, I think, at times to really get that salty.
Well, I find it interesting that you say that, because often what happens in food like mac and cheese and others that are extremely high in salt, there's also a very large sugar content that we don't think about. So the sweet begets the sweet, and we always think it's the salty, but there already is a combination of salty and sweet in there that really drives that craving for something more sweet. And then you want to counterbalance, because, well, everyone always says, if I could just have some chocolate covered potato chips or chocolate covered popcorn, that would make everything perfect. And then you just feel all of that inside you. Imagine all that sugar and all that salt. And then you go for, as you like to do, your weigh-in Wednesday, and you're like, but I didn't really eat that much.
Yeah. And then as you saw the other day, even, for all the things I've learned, and I'm pretty good about getting my head wrapped around, making better choices. But the other day, I mean, I just, as you would say, catabolic. I had a catabolic meltdown, like of epic proportions, and I didn't care. I could care less, and it was just, it was stuffed crust Pizza Hut, and then throw on top of that the Hershey's brownie. It was just like, it doesn't happen too often. But there are times that I will, when they're talking about Temptation Nation, I think one of the things that really is tough for people is they somehow feel that they should never have that ever happen. And I think for me, what I've learned is that I have not met anybody that doesn't have, like, some point in time a meltdown. I think the difference is what I found is by not hiding it and being afraid to share it. I don't care who you are. There's somebody someplace that the wheels have fallen off and they can't stop whatever they're doing. But I think what stops it for me is is the truth about it. Just not being afraid to just go like, you know what, I don't know what happened. And even in that particular case, I didn't really care. Like I told you, Andrea, I don't really care. I know all the things I should do. I knew everything that I should do, and I don't want to hear it because I'm just going to be like a little kid, spoiled little brat, and I'm going to go, as you would say, catabolic and have whatever the hell I wanted, and that was it. But I got it out of my system. It didn't necessarily feel great. And it's interesting because the more that I've done that and seen that happen, you kind of go like, you know what, it's not worth it. And that's what I kind of found out of this whole situation. Sometimes it's just not worth it to go there.
There are a couple of things that I absolutely love about what you were just talking about. Not only is it because this is real world, okay? This is what it's like for you, no longer on a show and having to deal with temptations every single day. You had an influencer, a very emotional influencer that caused you to just say, I don't care about anything. You wanted to go to that very catabolic, feel victim to whatever the situation was for you, and just say, well, everything sucks, so I'm just going to have this, and it's going to make me feel better in the moment. And you also forgot the 2 beers that you also had.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, 2 beers on top of that. Yeah, more salt, too.
Into all of that. But what was great about the whole thing is that you told me right away. You took pictures, you sent it to me, and you learned from it. You learned. And that's the key word here. You learned something, and you're taking it forward with you. You said it wasn't worth it. You didn't feel good afterwards. It didn't solve anything.
No,
it didn't make you feel better in the end. And so what was the point of all of that? Can we allow ourselves a treat every so often? Absolutely. But if it's just a treat every so often, that's a choice. The other part is that you said, I knew what I should have done. And, this is very key, Jay, very, very, very key to what our relationship is, and anybody that has a relationship with food or anything else, actually. What do you want versus what should you do?
Yeah.
And so in that moment, you wanted to feel bad for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I did.
You wanted to eat that food.
Yeah.
No, you shouldn't have, but you were at a point that you wanted to stay there, you wanted to have that experience, but you came out of it so quick that you immediately said, I don't want to feel this way again. I want to feel better with my next choices.
And I think the other part that was big was there wasn't any shame to it. There wasn't shame, there wasn't guilt, it was what it was. And I think that's the other part that happened. And I know for a lot of my alumni and also anybody that's really had a challenge with their weight, shame, that conversation is big. It really, unfortunately, it's where a lot of us have lived. And I know I was there for quite a while. But once I finally let go of that, I don't go on and on about it. And I'm not labeling myself as a food addict and a binger and a secret. Like, I've named those things that I've done at times. But it's interesting because they are actions that I've taken. I have binged, I've secret eaten, I've done things that I felt shameful about, but I'm not that as a person. They were just actions that I took. And I think that was one of the things that I've learned even in the coaching that you've shared with me is it doesn't need to define me as a person. Then I have to just keep that whole cloud around me. It's like, oh, okay, that's what I did. And I got it out and got it over. So.
And I want to tie that back into the show with when we had the weigh-in, the second weigh-ins.
Yeah.
And you heard Hope say how I let Colby down. I let my husband down. I let my team down. The shame, she felt so much shame for the choices that, okay, it was only 2 pounds she lost. But the thing is what you're hearing in there is, I'm doing this for them. And it's really about when we decide that we're going to put ourselves first, and what most people think is selfish really is about taking care of ourselves so we can show up better for everyone else. And you know that just as well. And so even when it came down to choices, we'll bring it over to the food truck, when Team Delvet had the choice to go up and look at the food truck and say, all right, what do I want? All those choices are there. And they even said it's too soon. I don't know what's good for me or what's not. And they're trying to ask the guy in the truck, what should I pick? And he's not being very helpful. So you're faced with these challenges and nobody there to hold your hand. And that's what it is in the real world. And that's what I like about Temptation Nation this year is that the guy's not really being helpful. He's like, just eat my tacos. I'm selling these tacos. Take them.
Yeah, it's not a big deal to him. You know, it's funny, when we were kind of thinking about what we were going to talk about tonight to try to keep it in 15 minutes, we weren't really going to talk that much about the food. We were like, it's the same old story. And it's funny, but it's almost always the conversation comes back to it, because as you know, it's 80 to 90% of anything that you're going to do is based on those food choices. Because I know that when I eat really well, I work out much better. If I don't eat really well, then it's like, I don't know if I want to work out, so it is interesting. If I had to put one thing in front of the other, it seems that where you can be more consistent on making better food choices, it just has a bigger effect. When I've tried to just exercise it away, it doesn't seem to work. I mean, I love the exercise, but it's like the food stuff keeps coming back. So I'm glad they keep bringing it up, even if sometimes at times it's like it's the same old story with mac and cheese and pizza and whatever. But that is the same old story. That's what we're faced with every single day. And
we constantly make those choices. And it's great that you talked about the exercise, because I think we can flip it over and let's talk about these workouts between, the 2 last chance workouts and the relay and the interaction amongst the team. I mean, you saw victim to victor with Dolvet's team. And I think a lot had to do with him taking accountability and holding himself responsible for what was going on in the interaction of his team there. So what are your thoughts on what occurred there?
Yeah, I think that, once again, we talked about it last week. I think it's back to the conversations, having real conversations. I think that the more they're allowing, like Felicia to say what she wants to say, I know, and when anybody is on a show and they're editing things, people can look a certain way, and then sometimes people online and social media will, be upset with somebody. You don't really know what the whole dynamic is of what's going on. And it is very, very stressful to be on a show like that. And you really feel vulnerable. There's a lot of vulnerability. You feel very much like you are out almost on a limb by yourself. So I want to tell people that, I'm not saying you shouldn't have feelings about whether you like people or don't like people, or one trainer is better than the other, whatever you want to think. But I got to tell you what, if you put unless you've ever been there, it's extremely stressful. And so what I'm glad to see is that they are having those conversations. And I think the more that a trainer takes responsibility for what they can do and how they can really listen to somebody and invite them to open up this conversation, it's very much like what you and I talk about. Sometimes there's the conversations on the surface that you think you're having, but there's a behind the scenes conversation person that's having in their head. A lot of times there's blind spots. So I'm hoping that as the show continues to progress, it seems to be that they're having more of those conversations with people, trying to really get them to talk about their individual feelings, how they are within a team. But like what you said before, you can't do health and wellness for your kids. You can't do it for your wife. You can't, it's an individual journey. And then you have to also be supportive of the other people in your life. So, I'm glad to see that they're talking about it, and there's more of conversations along that line, because I think that's really critical for anybody making a major transformation.
Yeah, and I also think it's great, let's talk about Felicia for a second, because in the beginning, she was so angry, and she was using what appeared through the show that she was using Dolvet and his form of training as the excuse for not showing up or talking back, or the reason why she blew up at the vote. And the whole concept of doing this for yourself, she's choosing not to show up for herself and using the excuses. Again, it comes down to, what do you want? How bad do you want it? And what are you willing to do? Because if she really, really, truly wants that healthy life and to be that ideal weight, lifestyle, everything, Dolvet's training methods should mean absolutely nothing. So again, what's influencing her? So this is a social influencing environment. In her life, she may be a leader. She may be the dominating one. And though when she doesn't have that chance to step up, this may be what's impacting her, that she doesn't get to shine. And so now she's being beaten up. And even on social media, I did see, as I mentioned to you earlier, that in the Twitter world, the way people are beating up on her, that's someone who really needs the help, and someone who really wants it and really needs the support of everyone to get her to the point of it is. Because you know what? She's reading these tweets. And do you want to send someone back into feeling bad about themselves and feeling very catabolic and feeling very victim to everything and saying, what was the point? Or do you want to be their champion and cheer them on? Our choice, how we want to show up for everybody else, especially if you're a fan of the show, you should always champion all the people that are on there.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And like I said, unless you've ever been there and you're out for all of your vulnerability for the world to see, you really don't know what that's like. I mean, you have no idea. Dr. H, love Dr. H. He's that guy that will show you how much hydrated fat, you've got on your body, how long you're going to live. Did a great example of showing that 218 pounds of the hydrated fat of what that really looks like. And I think really everybody got a good idea that, there's a lot more that's going on, underneath all that we don't see. And then, with Colby having the 420 pounds of worth of sugar in the year in terms of what, he's eating overall. And I think the thing that's important to remember is, when they say 420 pounds, I mean, obviously he's not going to gain 420 pounds, but not only the extra fat, but I mean, a body having to go through all of that metabolic change and toxicity and all. I mean, it's rough. I mean, just that level, when you think about how much the body has to process all that, it's destructive to say the least. So I love when Dr. H comes along. He's always the bearer of, reality check. He has so many models and things that he shows people that it really, I'd say one of the biggest things that most people don't really realize is that the level of medical support and data that a person gets when they get on the show, as far as a baseline and how they're improving. I know for myself that I love getting a blood test now. I love being able to find what the percentage of body fat is. I mean, because that's a number. The scale is fine. I mean, it is a measure. But the level of your actual blood levels and your, fat percentage of bone density and all that other stuff, I mean, it's amazing. Those are the numbers you really need to look at. And so when you go to the doctor, make sure that you have a doctor that can kind of give you some of those readings. It's really important.
Yeah, I think that's great. Dr. H really knows how to put it right in your face, just to see on a pan, well, whatever they do to do research on cadavers, just nothing but sugar on there. And it's like, okay,
yeah,
have it at home.
That was
and,
great.
To watch all that fat, the visceral fat, just in liquid form. And he even had the blood in there to really show, and just thinking. And I love the way Toy said, she's like, I don't see it. So it's on me. I don't see what it looks like, but wow. And the final part, which, whoo, that was really tough, was watching Rob have to get handed a sign of, if you don't shape up, you have a potential of your life being less than 5 years. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to react to something like news. It just handing it, and this is a piece of paper, and I have a feeling that piece of paper is framed in his house somewhere.
Probably, yeah, probably.
Show that's like above his work desk or something like that, to be like, no way.
Yeah. The challenges, Team Jen continues to do incredibly well. I mean, those guys are doing really well on the scale, but, Dolvet's team is doing really well on the challenges. And that's not unusual. Each season is usually kind of a ping pong match back and forth between everybody. Was there anything else from your perspective, Andrea, in watching the show this season? It's a little bit different. Anything that you noticed, because we're going to be pretty close to coming up to 15 minutes, that you kind of saw that you want to share with everybody as well?
For me, the ultimate theme that I'm really seeing in just these 2 episodes is it's really coming down to choice, right? And that's basically as what it is with anything in life. You have the choice. You have the power. And the folks that are on there right now are still learning to find where their power lies within. And as we progress, we're going to start seeing it come out, just like we saw Erin on the treadmill taking up that team leader role and really like pushing her team. So you're going to see some of these things happening. And I love it. That's the stuff that excites me when people say, I'm going to step up. This is for me. I know that I can do this. It has nothing to do with anybody else. So how they start making their choices moving forward throughout this season is going to be really awesome, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the other thing that's neat is sometimes there's people that are sleepers where they seem to have not been doing as well as maybe they could. Like, Hope lost 2 pounds and then lost 2 pounds, and you're going like, oh, wow, she's not really seeming to do that well. I've seen people go home, and you're like, they're going to come back in the finale, nothing's going to happen, and they like kill it. I mean, so it's really interesting because even though like you'll hear people say, I'm going to go home in America, you're going to see me and I'm going to change. And you're kind of going like, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But it's been amazing to watch certain people that will actually go home and not be in as stressful an environment. They had enough of something that they saw in themselves. They got a little glimpse of something. And they go home and they make a major transformation. And I've even seen some people that have been on the show 1 or 2 weeks, not only took off the weight, but actually in certain regards done extremely well and kept it off for the rest of their life as well. So it'll be interesting to see if the early people end up being really, really strong, and they very well may be. So let's wrap this up. I think we're close to about 15 minutes, hopefully, and I'm curious to see what happens next week on week 3, and I'm hoping you're getting ready because it's not going to be long until I'm out in LA with you. We're going to go to the finale, and you're going to.
I'm so excited to see you, and I get to hug you again.
It'll be we're going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to really get a kick out of what it's like to be able to go there and see everybody live and experience the energy. The energy on that finale is amazing. So we'll see what happens. So anyway, thanks everybody, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks, Jay. Bye, everyone.